You don't want the story where they started the journey, they had no issues, they lived happily ever after the end. That would be a terrible, terrible story. That'd be a terrible, terrible movie, a terrible book, a terrible plot line. You wouldn't watch it, it would tank. But the one who had the struggle, that's the one that we connect with. Let me tell you two stories, and I want you to tell me which one inspires you most, which story you find more valuable. Brittany was raised in a middle to upper class family. Dad was a doctor, mom was a lawyer, weren't rich, but didn't have any need. And when Brittany wanted to start a business, her family was able to support her. They were able to help her build her credit, to get her financing, to supply that business with the funding and the connections that it needed. And she started that business, and that business was a success. Second story. Brittany was raised in poverty. Brittany's parents worked very hard, didn't graduate from high school, but had work ethic. And they did all they could to provide for her family. And she saw them work day in and day out, and she understood what it meant for them to provide, but she still felt herself wanting more. She felt herself believing that she could provide more for her family and the generations after her. Brittany saw her parents struggle and constantly look at the price tag of groceries, of clothing, of shoes. When the other kids would go back to school and they had the newest clothes, she was just happy to have one new pair of shoes a year. But it taught her something. It taught her appreciation, and it taught her that she would have to work harder for the next generation. Not that she didn't appreciate where she came from and what that taught her, but she also understood that she had to do things differently. So when Brittany set out to start her business, Brittany didn't have connections. Brittany didn't have financing, and Brittany didn't know what a credit score was until she ruined it. To build her business and to bring her dream to life, she knew she had to work 5 times harder. But she did it. She overcame that adversity. She understood what it meant to build from the ground up, to say that I don't have much, but what I do have is work ethic. What I do have is appreciation. And Brittany, through trial after trial, she overcame, she persevered, and she saw it through. Even on days where she couldn't call anyone for help, she saw it through, and she was able to make her dream reality, regardless of where she started from. Which of those stories inspires you more? I know that's a rhetorical question because I know which one inspired you more. The one that inspires you more is the struggle. The one that inspires you more is the person who overcame, not the person who had every opportunity to be successful. And to all my Britneys out there, I'm not talking about any Britney in particular. It just came to mind. But the person that had to struggle, the person that had to come from a place where they didn't have any other choice. They didn't have anyone to fall back on. They couldn't call mom and dad to help pay their bills. They couldn't call mom and dad to sign on a vehicle for them because they didn't have any credit, or to help finance a home, right? That person has a more valuable story. And what I want to do today is to encourage you that your struggle is incredibly valuable, that your struggle has value because you had to overcome. And I'm talking to that person. I'm talking to that person, not that was born on third base like my first Brittany, but the person who was born in the parking lot across the street from the game, Brittany, right? The person that it wasn't even about being born on third base. She can't even get on the game. What does that mean to be born on third base? To be born on third base is to be born in those circumstances of finance, of wealth, of connections, of understanding, of wealth, of credit, of things like that. That's not where I was born. My story is very much so like second Brittany. My parents, neither of them graduated high school. My mom would go on to get her GED. My dad still never received any type of education. He just went to work. And he was a laborer, and he worked very hard. And I watched him work to provide for our family. And I was always so grateful for the smallest of things. For example, me being the oldest on my dad's side, when I was maybe 10 years old, he started to have a routine where, okay, they're starting to get older. They want things that, maybe as far as their birthday gift, we don't know what they want. So let's just give them money. And every year for our birthday, we'd get 20 bucks. And I was the first one. I said 10, 11 years old. And I would look forward to that. I'd look forward to that $20 But I was so grateful and appreciative of what my dad taught me as far as work ethic. Same thing with my mom. She would go on to get her GED. She had my oldest sister very young. On my mom's side, I'm the youngest. On my dad's side, I'm the oldest. So I guess, does that make me a middle child? I've kind of, had to always act as the oldest anyway. I saw her work hard, and I'm so grateful for what she did. And I, growing up, felt like I was behind. I felt like I had a disadvantage to other people that I knew that did come from money, that did have wealth, that didn't have to worry about if they were going to have new shoes to start school. One sport that, first of all, I was not built to play, but I wanted to play was basketball. Well, the reason I didn't play basketball was every year you had to buy these new shoes. Every person on the team had to have the same matching shoes, and they were very expensive. And I felt very ashamed that we couldn't afford them. So I just didn't play. Now, I did play football, and thankfully there wasn't any type of uniformity where everyone had to buy the same cleats or whatever. I'm thankful that I had that opportunity, but I didn't play basketball because of that. But I saw people that didn't have to worry about money, that didn't have to worry about where their next meal was coming from. And I always felt like I was behind. Now I know that was actually to my advantage. That made me the person that I am today. And I am not speaking here about a victim's mindset. I want to rid the world of a victim's mindset. You may have been victimized or things have happened to you, but you don't have to live as a victim. That is a podcast for another time. So I'm not speaking as poor me, poor you. No, I'm saying that you actually have an advantage, that your struggle is actually advantageous and it's incredibly valuable. And here's where this dawned on me. About 2 years ago, I was talking to a business owner, and he has built a very successful business at this point. And he was talking about his story. I'm trying to get to know his story. Where does he come from? Because I resonate more with people that come from struggle. I want to build with people that come from struggle. Now, I've met people who have come from wealth, but don't act like it. They're humble. They're approachable. They're appreciative. They understand that God is the owner of everything. God is the provider of everything. I've also met people who are born on third base and act like they hit a triple. But I was talking with this guy and trying to get to know his story. And he starts sharing, we didn't come from wealth. We weren't rich, but we had our struggles too. We had some struggles financially, but we overcame. And I said, what did your parents do? And he said, well, my dad was a doctor, my mom was a lawyer, but we weren't rich by any stretch of the imagination. I'm like, wait. What? Your dad was a doctor and your mom was a lawyer, and you're fabricating this struggle. Now, listen, I'm not saying that he did not have struggles in his life. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying he didn't have poverty struggles. He didn't worry where the next meal was coming from. He probably was able to afford new shoes to go to school, right? But what dawned on me in that moment, not to knock his story, is that people will fabricate struggle because they know that's a better story. And some of us don't have to fabricate struggle. We've known struggle. We've come from struggle. We've survived struggle. We don't have to make it up. It would honestly sound more made up if we tell you the truth, if we tell you where we really came from. And so I want to encourage you that someone right now that you're looking at that maybe comes from wealth or has a background that you envy, wished they had your story, because it creates a better story in the long run. It creates a better story when you can come from that and become this. When you can come from there and go there, when you can have this much and earn that much, right? That is something that really resonates with people. They want to hear that story. They want to hear about second Brittany, the one that overcame the struggle to triumph, the one that persevered in the face of all rejection and all trials and tribulations, still saw it through. Not the one who was born on third base, thought they hit a triple, ran it into home, and said, "Yay, look at me!" Right? And again, if you're someone that comes from that background and you think I'm coming at you, I'm not. I'm trying to encourage the person who is like me, the person that disqualified themselves for so long because they didn't know what was possible. The person that didn't understand that these struggles are actually the most valuable part of my story, that these struggles actually made me who I am today. And so I'm trying to talk to that person to help them break through that limiting mindset of, well, I can't because I don't. Well, I can't because my parents didn't. No, that's not true. That is part of your story. That's a part of that trial that you get to overcome. Every movie that you've ever watched follows the story brand concept, right? The story concept. Donald Miller made story brand famous, but story has been literally around since the Bible. There is a character that has a struggle, has something they need to overcome. They have a trial. They have a guide that joins them. They face the struggle, they fail, they face the struggle again, they overcome, happy ending, right? That's every movie, every story ever. You don't want the story where they started the journey, they had no issues, they lived happily ever after the end. That would be a terrible, terrible story. That'd be a terrible, terrible movie, a terrible book, a terrible plot line. You wouldn't watch it, it would tank. But the one who had the struggle, that's the one that we connect with. That's the one that we identify with. And for you and your journey and what you're building, your business or whatever it may be, your struggle is so valuable in the marketplace. And what I want to do is encourage you in that is that you are not born on third base. You may, like me, have been born in the parking lot across the street from the ball game, can't even get into the game. I get it, but you don't have to stay there. Use that to fuel you. Use that to understand that that's an advantage. That is such an advantage. When you come from that place, you think differently, you see differently, you move differently. You have a different sense of urgency. Some of you who may be a little bit further along in your career, you may have had a fat bank account once in a while. I've definitely been there in my coaching and my consulting is like, oh man, I'm good now. But when you have come from nothing and you get to that point, you don't get comfortable. You understand, okay, now what's the next level? It's not about being complacent. It's not about, I want more for the gluttonous fact of wanting more. It's no, I know what that was like to come from actual nothing, and I'm not going to go back there. You see things differently. And as a matter of fact, it teaches you resourcefulness. When you have to only depend on you, you can only rely on yourself. There's a different level of resourcefulness that person has that the market will connect with. There's a different level of resourcefulness that person has that will take them to higher levels. For example, if I would have come from money, if I would have come from wealth, first of all, I don't think I would have been shaped in the way that I am right now. Yeah, I feel like I would have constantly been called to more, but I wouldn't have fire in my gut to say, I want to change the trajectory and the lineage of my family, the Trujillo name, forever. Right? I wouldn't have had that fire. I probably would have been complacent. I would have settled. I would have been okay with just being comfortable. But because I came from that, I had this fire. But second, if I would have come from a place where I could just access capital or I could finance anything, my parents couldn't buy me a car. They couldn't even co-sign for me to buy a vehicle, let alone buy me a vehicle, right? Everything that I did, I had to build from on my own. And I'm grateful for that. And I am grateful for my parents. But if I had not come from those means, then I wouldn't have had the resourcefulness to end up here, right? I wouldn't have had this situation that I had to battle for constantly overcoming objections and rejections and trials. I wouldn't have had the character to do this. So what I'm trying to instill in you is to be grateful for your struggle. Someone wishes they had your story because they know it would make a better story. They understand what we don't is that, man, I wish I had some struggles. I wish I had some trials because I don't really have any trials and I can't tell people because that's a bad story. You have those struggles. You actually have an advantage. So use those to your advantage. No victims here. You weren't born on third base. You were born in the parking lot, but that doesn't mean that you still can't get in the game. So let me know how this resonates with you. Let me know how you identify with this. I'm easily accessible. If you are that person who feels like that, but you know that you were built for more, you know that you were called to more, and you're in the Charlotte area, let's connect. Charlotte, North Carolina. I'd love to encourage your story. Beyond that, if you're in the Gaston County area and you want to plug into a community that are driven like that to build regardless of where they come from, then here at Alchemy Co-working, we have a space for you, for us to grow together. When you step into an environment like this, where every person is pursuing a dream, every person is overcoming a trial, regardless of where they come from, you can't help but elevate your game. And I want to invite you into that. So thank you for joining this episode of The Extraordinary Podcast. I'm your host, Keanu Trujillo, founder of Alchemy Co-working, and we'll see you next time.